It was a fateful day back in August 2020 when the world was trying to deal with a new temporarily normal circumstances as a novel pandemic was threatening collective life of people, when Epic Games decided it was the best day to actually update both the iOS and the Android version of Fortnite with some underlying and untraceable code that actually did not raise flags respectively on the security of both App Store and the Google Play Store. This particular code made Epic Games introduce its own direct and in-application payment system for Fortnite across all platforms, called the Fortnite Mega Drop. The new system implemented permanent discounts up to 20% of V-Bucks, Fortnite's in-game currency. On PC and console, this isn't a problem, alright, but in the mobile world, it's the beginning of today's main topic on today's episode. Hello there, I am Jesus of Jesus Gaming and Podcast, and let's get the backstory first to react to what we are today. As you know, both Apple and Google have a policy to collect a 30% from in-game purchases on their platform, respectively the App Store for iOS devices and the Google Play service for Android and device eligible to have our Play services, and today is considered or was considered a norm. But it is a norm that Epic Games felt entitled to question and challenges as the Fortnite update went live and both Apple and Google found out that they were taken in advantage by Epic Games. They swiftly retired Fortnite out of the reach of new iOS and Android users. But this was a card play by Epic Games, as the activation and posterior ban of Fortnite on mobile platform was a trap to actually Epic launch a free Fortnite hashtag campaign and then launched the infamous 1984-hour parody video, which was Fortnite characters being free from Apple grabs in the like the infamous 1984 ads of the first Macintosh computer that Apple presented back then, but having to actually have Apple and CEO Tim Cook look really antagonistic. Along with the public campaign, Epic Games has also launched a lawsuit against Apple to, in its words, end Apple's unfair and anti-competitive actions that makes Apple's undertakes to unlawfully maintain its monopoly in two distinct, multi-billion-dollar markets, the iOS app distribution market and the iOS in-app payment processing market. It was also followed with a lawsuit against Google for similar reasons. Let's talk about first the Apple trial. Fast forward, Epic versus Apple trial ran from May 3 to May 24, 2021. In a September 2021 ruling in the first part of the case, the judge Yvonne Gonzalez-Rogers decided in favor of Apple on 9 of 10 accounts, but found against Apple, and this one has to do with this anti-steering policy under the California unfair competition law. Rogers prohibited Apple from stopping developers from informing users of other payment systems within its apps. Epic appealed the ruling through the original ruling was upheld in 2023. There were interesting things that were revealed during the trial more than the verdict itself, and that includes Sony's insistence that crossplay between PlayStation and other platforms was bad for PlayStation's business, the not-so-secret that the App Store is heavily profitable, Xbox and Microsoft saga against Apple with the iOS version of the Game Pass beta fiasco, and the Epic Games and Apples were already dealing with their differences quite a time before the whole ordeal. But let's go in deep with each and every one of them. And let's start with the PlayStation no rule of cross-playing that Sony initially fronted. Fortnite debuted in 2018 to the PlayStation, and initially it was promised that PC, mobile, and Nintendo Switch gamers could play with each other. Sony tried hard on Epic Games having PlayStation as an internal alternative, because Sony saw crossplay as a business liability for its business that was only willing to adopt it after Epic agreed to a complicated cross-platform revenue sharing agreement. It's a unique arrangement, or I should say it's a unique arrangement. Sorry about that. But since PlayStation surprisingly became the top revenue driver for Fortnite at the time, Epic seems to have been willing to make concessions for the platform to keep everyone happy. It will take some years to finally Sony decide to scale back its futile and silly war against crossplay, as it was inevitable at the end. Now, we also discovered during the revealings of the trial that Apple things that people doesn't think that the App Store is a money driver for Apple, as they try to convince so hard to the world that not even them can calculate how much the money the company makes out of the App Store because of a spaghetti-like comparison and making numbers to be a guess game. In fact, former VP Phil Schiller has said that outright that he had no idea if the App Store has brought in more money than it spent since 29 or 29 2009 or whatever you want to call that year, because now that's not how he looked at the business. And for some context, the App Store brought in more than $60 billion in 2020, which will be quite a lot to burn through without realizing. Tim Cook was a little bit more reserved, saying that he believed that it was profitable, but hadn't calculated by that much. The firmest number came from an expert witness hired by the Epic side, who pegged the profit margin as high as 78%, that will leave Apple with more than $45 billion in profit from the App Store alone. But don't expect them to admit that aloud. And honestly, in my opinion, I know that Apple knows. I think that we know that Apple knows. But in reality, it's easily to masquerade your numbers for quarterly reports for your shareholders and your stockholders. Maybe like hiding those numbers and not hiding like they don't exist. Hiding, I refer as, like I said, as masquerading, and probably let's have the App Store numbers on the services segment of the report, because obviously they can have the Apple TV Plus, Apple Music, and the Apple One subscription as part of their revenue. So there you have how Apple can legally hide those numbers without looking that they are lying or anything, or become liable for this. That they are lying, that they can't really have exact numbers, probably. But it is enough to stake and shareholders and stockholders to demand exact numbers. I think that pretty much Apple using a loophole in becoming a public company and its laws. I think that's a loophole that Apple is currently exploiting. But don't take this as a legal fact, because I don't have any evidence about that. But I think that common sense will tell you that Apple doesn't have an accountant that they can pinpoint how directly they are making out of the App Store. And by the way, one particular topic that arose and was very apparent in the cloud gaming community was the unusual need of Apple to have completely scrutiny on services like Stadia, Xbox Game Pass Cloud, Project X Cloud Beta by them, and GeForce Now from respectively Google, Microsoft, and Nvidia. This was the same thing that plagued the failed iOS Game Pass Beta that only saw Halo Master Chief Collection available for iPhone and iPad users. Meanwhile, PC and Android users were practically enjoying all the available games catalog back then. The method used by Apple? As revealed in the Epic trial, there were some internal documentations that Apple wanted solutions from Microsoft that were far-reaching and many burdens, including to have a whole individual Game Pass Cloud app for each games, including the same Game Pass Cloud iOS client. And it was obvious that the same requirement was enforced to Google and Nvidia. So, in perspective, the idea is to having 100 plus Game Pass apps as an instance for all available games, and having a Netflix-like structure where you need to recreate and retire apps constantly was a really weird concept and disingenuous, with an existence that Apple needed to verify each and every one of them. Also, we learned that Apple was trying to slow down the support of progressive web apps, or PWAs, or applications that are installed within a website and permits their usage as if there were a natively installed app, but with the advantage of not being actually an installed app. This was a great study for Google in terms of making alternative for iOS gamers of Stadia, because Stadia, they did have a client on the App Store, but they actually made it to Stadia to be installed as a progressive web apps, and that is how many gamers were actually more comfortable on playing within the Safari of iPhones and iPad devices. Can you imagine the App Store being plagued by individual Game Pass game? I think that in a technical and the common sense standpoint, I agree. That was really a far reaching for Apple. Now we go with the Apple trial verdict. As you know, the original verdict in September 10, 2021 was a split decision in which Apple was found not guilty in 9 out of the 10 claims by Epic Games, losing only in the final charge related to anti-steering provision or Apple should not disallow the use of external payment system in iOS app. The decision that Apple is currently appealing as the recording of this. Meanwhile, Epic Games was granted not being completely banned from the App Store, as this would have meant the retirement of the iOS instances of Unreal Engine and would have provoked a gaming crisis within iOS because many games are built with Unreal Engine. And Apple banning Epic Games as a developer in general would have invoked a rule that Unreal Engine would have been virtually prohibited to be used on building iOS games. And with this, we can say that that would have been a great gaming apocalypse, because not every game is made from Unity. There are developers that have found a great way to develop games or mobile versions of AAA games using the Unreal Engine, and Apple kind of disservicing itself just to make the dent to Epic Games. That is another L from Apple. Now with that, we can talk about this month event with the Google trial. Ironically, starting with the same campaign, the Epic versus Google trial was a different game from the Apple trial. At this gaming arena, Epic needed to do some modification as its pre-trial procedures. Google managed to convince court that Google asserted that the Android operating system does not have the rights or the same single storefront restriction as Apple iOS, and thus allow different Android phone manufacturers to bundle different storefronts and apps as they desire. Google said they are negotiating with Epic Games far differently from Apple in their case, which was a really good thing to say, that the Apple trial was not the kind of thing that Epic Games should have dealt with Google, because historically the Google Play services is much less restrictive than the Apple Store. Also, Epic Games took the advantage of the antitrust violation accusation related to the Play Store in early July 2021 by 36 states in the United States, and amended the lawsuit to comply more with this lawsuit, and therefore Fortnite banning was not the focus, but Google Play service policy were the main target here. Finally, Google countersued Epic in 2021 in the month of October, asserting that by introducing a version of Fortnite that did not use the Google Play's payment system, Epic violated their contract with Google, and because this version still exists and can be obtained in other formats outside Google Play, Epic has an alternative being unjustified in reach at Google expenses and seek to recover monetary damage from this version. And of course, this trial, we have learned so many new things. Starting that on December 11, and just with hours of deliberation, the jury at the Epic and Google trial found out Google Play App Store and Google Play billing system is actually an illegal monopoly. In short, Google has a monopoly power in the Android app distribution markets and in-app billing service market. That Google did is anti-competitive in those markets, and that Epic was injured by that behavior. Jury also decided that Google has an illegal tie between its Google Play App Store and its Google Play billing payment service too, and that the distribution agreement, Project Hug, deals with a games developer and deals with OEMs or original equipment manufacturers were all anti-competitive. With all this, Google Affairs and Policy VP Wilson White said that the company plans to appeal the verdict, and that the trial made it clear that the internet giant competes fiercely with Apple and its App Store, as well as app stores on Android devices and gaming consoles. Yeah, we heard about Project Hug or all like that, and I said earlier that there are things, or so many things that we learn about that happen backstage that were not publicly before. So what do we actually learn? I'm going to list it, and then we're going to discuss it. Google Gaming's priorities were beyond Stadia and how they can have a more in business footprints within the gaming market. Some mishap between Google and Samsung ruined a perfect crossover. Google actually wanted to steer the Epic Games ship. Some Apple-like moves, and despite calling it business as usual, Google did offer some exclusive deals to partners. So let's talk about the priorities of Google in the past few years. It's somewhat like a semi-secret and not so secret. Google had an erratic 4 years dance, starting with the whole announcement with Stadia as its concept of gaming via cloud gaming initially went off, to have a rapid descent in usage and popularity, along with mismanagement and miscalculated reach. In the trial brought by Epic Games, it was revealed that Google's biggest play priority for Q1 of 2019 was to address what they call agitators like Epic, ironically. And Epic's names appeared many times in the internal Google strategy document that was presented in court. Google feared as many as 100% of top game developers would follow Epic's lead by launching outside of Google Play, denying Google a 30% of cut revenue, and that fear that doesn't seem to have been misplaced, not only with the other agitators in direct contact with Epic's, but many either launched or were internally planning to launch a competitive game store on Android before Google approached them with a deal. For this, Google called the contagion effect and forecast it meets $2 billion in revenue by the end of 2022, perhaps even $3.6 billion. The company estimated it will miss out $215 million from Fortnite alone and $243 million a year if Activision Blizzard King removes its game like Candy Crush from Google Play. And so, Google formulated a plan that it will save money by spending fewer billions, but ironically, once focuses to be and invested on Stadia, Google did land a partnership with Activision a few years ago, and when Stadia was still in service, the deal only were for service a back end for Call of Duty needs. This was a deal that favors Google Cloud, actually, not Stadia. This brought the and of course, those who were following Stadia news back then, it was fine to speculate that at least Call of Duty Warzone was getting a Stadia version, which honestly didn't sound bad, but unfortunately it was never meant. Now, I said before there was a project hog, and many tech giants, including Google, has the, I don't know to say, costume, or there's always a plan, including that there are monetary plans that are called like a project. So I mentioned a project hog. And this is how Google called for plans to make investment to respond to the contagion of agitator Epic Games, and studios included Activision, Aniplex, Bandai Namco, Bethesda, Blizzard, Come to Us, Electronic Arts, Keen, Mixi, Niantic, NCSoft, Netmarble, NetEase, Nexon, Nintendo, Pearl Abyss, The Pokemon Company, Riot Games, Square Enix, Supercell, Tencent, and Ubisoft. In this project, at one point, the Google Play business development team asked for $575 million through 2022 to make those deals, though it is likely the final numbers are far higher. Activision alone was offered over $360 million in a deal that now apparently is worth billions. 20 game developers signed it, as it was revealed on Core, but not Supercell and not Epic, which got and rejected a special $147 million offer designed to convince the company to launch Fortnite on Google Play. This part of the trial was interesting because the admission of Google was used by Epic Games' legal team to actually make a micro accusation of Google deliberately making bribes but failing to do so. Also, and in parallel, a project called Project Banyan was revealed, and it was a joint venture with Samsung, Android's top hardware maker, which would have started a world where people could see Google Play and the Galaxy Store side by side on the default home screen of all the Samsung Galaxy devices. While the status or result of this joint venture is truly a failure or a success, Epic Games' legal team tried to use it as an example of Google's evil approach and negatively disrupt everyone else's business, but this attempt was another failure within the victory of Epic Games, as the jury didn't, or the jury wasn't that convinced that Google ruined their chances, because Samsung, while depending on Android for their devices, they have proven that they can have a life without Android. Obviously, they needed to do their better homework, because I'm not using Tyson as an example. For those techie the are fan or those who are fan of technology but never heard what's Tyson in, or maybe they heard it because it's what is running the I think it was until last year or maybe two that was running the Galaxy World series. Tyson was looked as a Android alternative, which was a pet project from the Linux Foundation and was backed up by giants like Intel and Samsung. And years later, Samsung was delegated to be the hardware marker for, or hardware maker, I should say. Sorry about that. I've been saying marker instead that maker. Sorry about my English. With the tax making devices with Tyson, the only Samsung Galaxy that was made with Tyson as a operating system was only launched in Russia, as far as I know. And then Samsung tried to connect the Internet of Things with Tyson, and I think there was a few television sets that really brought Tyson in, but Tyson really saw life in the wearable aspect. All this before Samsung moved with Android with Wear OS by Google. One thing though, and returning to the topic, Google at some point had enough of Epic Games to the point to have run Project Electra, and that's the project that pretty much Epic Games tried to highlight because it was actually Google handling money to Epic Games. And no, not as a joint venture, and probably knew that a takeover would have been impossible to avoid the Department of Justice or the FTC. So the project was to actually research on the possibility on buying Epic Games stocks to the point on going for a majority and controlling stake and having Fortnite along Android lead the adventure of mobile gaming. This project was designed in 2018, a little after the failed initial conversation of Fortnite reaching to Android, and even before Stadia was in the picture. But if materialized, would you imagine Google controlling the mobile gaming market outside iOS with Fortnite, and also with the final say on Unreal Engine and Stadia? I'm not gonna lie, it's interesting. For me, it's truly interesting to imagine that kind of scenario. But Stadia out of the picture. Probably Google at the end thought it was a bad idea, but come to think of it, and let me know in the comment what are your thoughts, or how do you foresee Google with the majority stake on Epic Games nowadays in 2023? And finally, and this was one of the main points that Epic Games actually could pull this off, and not even Google's fierce critics and competitors could, deals with the Google Play Store and Google Play service, along with a massive campaign on not sideloading independent app store. Yes, despite Android having AOSP, or the Android open source project, which anyone can download and modify Android as they see fit, as long as they're following certain rules or recommended steps. And obviously OEMs and paid Android devices can also have sideload. So you will never expect Google to say, no, you shouldn't sideload an application, or uploading an APK and have your phone installing an application, which I'm not going to deny it. It is really a security risk if you don't know what you're doing, or if you don't know where you actually should look for clean APKs, or APKs that doesn't mean a keyhole or a key for a hacker to hack your phone. And the problem with Google at this revelation is that Epic Games actually made their point on that Google is not fair with partners. The main example was a big one, and it was with Spotify. Spotify has their own issues, and as well with the music industry, and Epic Games was successful in revealing that Spotify can pay 0%, yes, zero, nothing, nada, to get all the benefits of Google Play Store's safe payments, and also force Google to admit that it wanted to keep things unfair to keep profits high. Also, Spotify is effectively getting a 15% point discount to use its own billing system, paying Google nothing for any of the customer that picks Spotify payment. I think that it is needless to say that it was hard on Google's legal team to justify this, and a good thing, because using data at the time of the trial could put in risk an ongoing negotiation that Google's is actually taking. making this a big blow on the defense of Google. Although the legal team tried to have negotiations perceived as a Google's having hard time with other parties negotiation or negotiating unfairly, which I think it was not a good strategy if you don't have the numbers or if you don't have anything to prove it. So pretty much you handed your case or that particular part of the case, you handle it in a super play to Epic Games. While the Spotify revelation was corrected diffuse in part because Google did prove that Spotify is not an absolute persuasive for users choosing anything other than an Android device for your mobile or tablet needs, I think that this particular part was really damaging in the defense of Google and pretty much Epic Games gaining a big advantage. And to wrap up things here, as you're already aware, Google is going to appeal, so any further than big changes to the Google Play market is not happening anytime soon. But if Google really loses the appeal, probably in the next few years to come, indeed we will see not only changes and an historical one within one of the most used ecosystem by Google, but this will indirectly affect chances of Apple if their appeal process is still ongoing and probably cannot ignore this as a precedent, which in terms means as a double victory for Epic Games in the long run. In my point of view of things, and probably I'm gonna get some critics here, but this is how I feel and how I see things. I reject, I repeat, and I will want it to sound clear. I reject Epic Games portraying themselves as martyrs. Because to me, they are also giants and dominant in their ways. And it was recently that they claimed that Valve needed to redesign that 30% fee for developers and publishers to make Fortnite available on Steam. But I want people to remember, please don't forget that the first years of the Epic Games Store, Epic Games were actually paying developers to make time exclusive for PC versions of popular and massively awaited games back then, and they don't see it as a bad thing, which in some way they are, because they are limiting consumer. Because why they feel entitled to limit consumers? I think that's the same as scummy as they are calling scummy Apple and Google. Who the hell they think they are? To me, this crusade of Epic Games is proving that they're just another giant in a giant wars, and customers should need to understand the implication of something like Epic Games are doing. In the long run, it will end to be just a positive exclusive to them. Not even the players, the consumer, will see any kind of advance or why Epic Games being the only choice is the best choice for gamers. I think, I remember the last thing that Epic Games pulled is that developers and publishers that make games to be only available at the Epic Games Store, Epic Games will not charge any revenue of it. And I don't know why they decided to use that as an opening statement that the Epic Games Store is already 5 years old, half a decade, and is still operating in negative. But they are willing to keep going the negative because blah, blah, blah. We go with the market thing. And I really dislike so much hypocrisy. If they were really martyrs, I don't know. I think they should have been playing better games and not going for the corporate wars. That's how I see it. This is just a petty corporate wars. This is nothing that really gamers should root or heck, not even root or just go against it. This is kind of the thing that you would love to see corporations kill each other, but that's not going to happen here. And that is why I deny this notion for the Epic game. I don't deny that I claim free games and will never stop, dude. You know why I will never stop, dude? Because if they want to be the real martyrs, then the best thing that I have to do as a consumer is to really not helping Epic Games buying anything out of them and just claiming free games. Because those free games meant more money to developers and publishers. So if they really want to be a martyr, go create accounts, multiple accounts, and be sure, obviously, to correctly confirm them. And claim as much as game as you can just to make your voice heard that Epic Games are just in this for themselves. I don't see how this really helps the consumer or the gamers itself, because they say that they are attacking this fee and helping the developers, blah blah blah. But I would love to see what's really gonna be the next move, because yeah, Valve charged 30% because obviously Steam and Steam ecosystem needs some revenues because it doesn't maintain by itself. But I dare to say that Valve has more history on being pro gamers and maybe pro developers more than Epic Games. To me, Epic Games is not different as for Apple, neither Google. Let me know in the comments what are your thoughts about all this, what we learned in both trials brought by Epic Games, and about the last thing I said, that you're actually rooting, you're waiting some true outcomes, or do you agree that Epic Games are trying to portray undeservedly as martyrs? That's my thinking. I know that I could be wrong, but I'm gonna maintain that this is just my opinion in 30,000 feet of distance. So if you're watching this on YouTube podcast, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button so you can support this gaming channel. And if you're listening the audio only version via Spotify and or Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Castbox, iHeartRadio, Overcast, Pocket Cast, or Radio Public, thank you so much for your support. This was Jesus of Jesus Gaming and Podcast. Have a good one, health, and success.